All right, John. Well, today I thought let's start off the habits. I want to know what habits you have partaken of today. What are the routines, habits that today has happened?
Well, it's funny. One of the things that you and I both share is this idea of starting our days early, starting the days with both water and coffee. So that's part of the habit that you and I share. Another one that has been beneficial to not only this day, but in the days leading into this day is getting up early, man. I have four kids. I'm married, have a busy life. And I find if I don't force myself out of bed, I just respond to the rest of the day, whether that's emails or phone calls or beeps or whatever the thing is, I'm being drawn by it rather than actively leading it. And so each day I'm up about 5:30 or so, up a little before the sun, get outside with a cup of coffee, a water, a journal. I watch the sunrise, I listen to the birds sing, and it's my moment of the day to listen, to take inventory of what I'm grateful for, to pray, and to reflect not only on what I already have, but what I want to get done that day.
All right, I'm going to dig in right there. First off, what is your coffee style?
So Beth and I use a drip coffee now, and so nothing that impressive. Whatever she brings home from the store, I make it. It sits there for a couple hours, and about 10 o'clock or so in the day, we dump whatever remains out.
Yeah.
So the coffee style is whatever my sweet wife brings home from the store, but
Okay.
it's a drip coffee.
So not a coffee snob. That's all right. At least you partake of the
I
beverage.
partake, man, and I know enough to know when something tastes better than what I'm used to making, and that's common when I'm on the
Yeah.
road or
Yeah.
when I'm at a friend's house. But at home, beggars can't be choosers, man. I'm grateful for the gift of caffeine.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy enjoying my coffee, though I'll have to admit to some snobbery. Uh, getting up early. So when did you start that? Because I didn't. I mean, it's something I hold on to dearly now, but it was not the majority. It wasn't. I don't
Right.
know exactly. I'm gonna guess. I don't know, 7 years maybe. I'd have to go back and try to figure it out, but I didn't. I woke, I slept as long as I could, get up and then start dealing with everything. And so it was a big change for me. What about you?
Absolutely. And naturally, man, I'm innately lazy. I'm lethargic. I love to be open to the day, whatever the day has in store. You find though that people who are most athletic, people who are most in great shape, they diet and they go to the gym and you're like, huh, that's weird. They all seem to do that. Well, in the same vein, people who are highly effective leaders tend to start their days early. They tend to get up early. And so that's not my habit naturally. My habit is to get up when I finally yawn, hopefully on a Saturday before the banks close, man. That's the good old days. If I can get to the bank before it's closed, I'm high-fiving myself. If I can have breakfast from McDonald's before they shut that thing down at 11, I win the day.
Yeah.
That was the old me. But in taking notes of people who lead their businesses, their families, their faith, they're concerned about their physical health, and making a difference in the community. All of them, for the most part, almost all of them have in common this desire to drive the day. They get up before they have to.
Well, I got to admit, I mean, I don't know if I mean, now I do. I enjoy getting up then, but it was mainly just because of the kids' schedules. If I'm going to, like you said, if I'm going to have that time in the morning to center myself, to set myself, I've got to get up early because, school schedules or even just little kids, either one. And now I've gotten in the habit, but yeah, it's still, if I don't take that, it's just too easy for other things to jump in. So I've had Hal Elrod on the show, Miracle Morning,
I
Raman
love
Sharma, the 5
that.
a.m. talking about that. And it is interesting when you look, I haven't thought about this till now. When you look at habits, I mean, how many times do people write an entire book devoted to a specific habit?
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of one. I mean, sleep, I guess those, there's some books out now on sleep, but I don't have one on, somebody wrote a book on push-ups or uh, even devotions, or you mentioned journaling. I mean, we all talk about it. I don't know if, so for early to have a focus like that says a lot to me. Now you did mention journaling, which we talk about a lot. So many people as well testify to that, but I found out that people journal very differently. What is your methodology or content that you journal?
So it's similar to what I speak on frequently. So when I guide an organization through our motivational message, frequently I'll use three questions to help them to become more highly effective as individuals and as organizations. And the three questions are why me, who cares, and what more can I do? Why me? And the idea is to begin your day before you need to. So if you are the kind who is racing after your day just to get out the door on time or get the kids to the bus or whatever it might be, well, then maybe it's time to set our alarms 10, 15, 20, 30, 1 hour early. And I can think of no better way than to ask the question, why me? Kevin, I love sunrises. Sunsets. I've known that about myself for as long as I've been aware, man. Since I was a little boy, I love sunsets. But there's something about a sunrise. There's something about the whole world being dark, everything, and quiet. And there's a few birds up. There's maybe a couple joggers or walkers up, but for the most part, man, it's quiet. And you get to sit there in your backyard, patio, screen porch, wherever it might be, look to the east. And then eventually, man, you watch the sky turn from dark to gray. And then there's this little shimmer of light, and it starts cutting through the darkness, bringing light into the day. And for you to have a journal in front of you and to be taking inventory of how good life is, that doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean you're always healthy. It doesn't mean you're completely financially stable right now. It doesn't mean business is going perfectly right now, or your relationships are gangbuster always. It just means you're going to begin your day in a place of gratitude. And it is the most critical place to begin that day. So I begin every day outside with that question in front of me, why me?
Well, so let me ask, you said a couple things there. So when we talk about journaling, you mentioned gratitude, but what I find is people often, kind of a basic way to start journaling is just to give a history. Gosh, yes, this is what happened yesterday, which I think is great to take into account and conceptualize what actually did happen, the day before or whatnot. So that's good. But then you talked about gratitude. A lot of people, testify to that. I'm going to write down things that I'm grateful for. Then there's plans, of this is what I want to accomplish today. And then the fourth area that I see, and I'm just making this up right now, but as you were talking, I was thinking about it. The other one then is kind of ideas, thoughts, feelings. I'm going to put those in one category: ideas, thoughts, feelings. So where would you say, do you do some of all of those? Do you gravitate more to one primary category?
So the answer is yes, but not in exactly the linear fashion you might think. So
Okay.
the morning's just about centering and prayer and gratitude and reflection and making sure that I'm breathing and like really recognizing the gift that this life is. If you read the headlines, you're convinced that there's no reason for hope. But if you can just go outside and look out the window or look toward the east, gosh, there sure seems like a lot of reason for hope. Yeah. So I do start there. Then to answer the original question you just asked, my ideas, my dreams, my inventory of the day, that's at the end of the day when I ask the question, what more can I do? And I have a journal right next to my toothbrush with the question on top. The question is, what more can I do? And for me, that's a question I learned, and you and I recorded a whole podcast 150 episodes ago on this one, the Jack Buck story. This announcer who showed up in my life when I was 9 years old and burned and dying, and he walks in, he sees that there's no reason for hope in this little boy's future. And rather than just giving up on this kid after visiting me one time, he's told by the staff, John's going to die. But he went home that night and he asked a question. And the question Jack asked 33 years ago was, what more can I do? What more can I do? And in answering that question, he became a Hall of Fame announcer. In answering that question, he received a couple Purple Hearts. He raised 8 healthy kids. He did a whole lot of great things in his life. But in answering that question that night on January 18th, 1987, he comes back the following day and he visits John O'Leary. And then he does it again the following day. And we begin this relationship together, this relationship built toward hope, this idea of John O'Leary Day at the ballpark. And so he taught me that question 3.5 decades ago. It changed his life. And as a little boy, I observed this and I wanted to do likewise growing up. And you and I recorded another podcast somewhat recently around a journal I kept for my wife. Like, yep. Why would you keep a journal entry for your wife every single day? Where did that idea come from? Well, for me, it came out of asking a simple question one night: what more can I do to be a better spouse? Sometimes it's about being a better dad. Sometimes it's about being a better leader in my faith, a better example in my organization, a better in my health, better in my charitable giving. But what more can I do to make a greater influence through the days that I have? And so that question's all around brainstorming and ideation and creativity and tracking the day and making it better for tomorrow.
Okay, John, I can't reach it unless I take my earphones out. I was going to show it to you. I started the journal for my wife.
But I'm so excited.
Yeah, I did one. I did an entry today. I keep it right in the top of my backpack where I take a laptop back and forth. And I started that. I want to ask you about the we're going to veer a little bit around. Habits is my muse, but I'm not going to miss some valuable rabbit trails. When you say, what more can I do? Speak to that, or I want your thoughts, because I'm sure you know people, and you may have been that people at some point where you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't need to hear what more can I do? I am pouring out, I am doing so much. And I find people who get frazzled in that, and then they're trying to find a justification to chill out and really probably get some self-care, which is okay. So we're talking about a guilt issue here, because I like that. What more can I do? Though I just know that there's people that are going to hear that are going to go, seriously, what more can I do? Because they're consistently on themselves, the high performers, high achievers, to always do more. And sometimes that gets tiring if we don't have some peace and contentment with who we are today, how we are, the arena that I'm talking in.
Yes.
But go ahead, reconcile that a little bit for the folks that are hearing, what more can I do? And it feels a little heavy.
So there's this idea that nothing would be worse than to become successful at things in life that do not matter. And that it's a really important thing for us high achievers to hear that quote and let it really deeply sear us. Because nothing, honestly, man, nothing is worse than racing so fast up a ladder only to recognize at the end of the days, you had the thing leaned against the wrong wall. And so that question sometimes is about, how can I make more money? How can I make more sales? How can I go 3x next year? And that's great, man. I love achieving things too. That's really perfect. So for those of us who feel the need to do that right now, and maybe it's a season where you need to do that, and it's healthy to be doing that, then we should be asking the question around a growth focus. Other times it's about relationships, ones that have gone sideways, maybe frequently in your family, frequently those closest and nearest to us. You and I talked about our spouses recently, this idea of reinventing ourselves to be better spouses for those that we want to serve most effectively going forward. So sometimes that's where that question is. But other times it's only about you. It is about racing away from the treadmill and slowing down to the things that actually matter. It's about taking inventory and taking pause, what's happening in your health, what's happening in your personal finances, what's happening as you sprint through life. And so I do think it's really important that we understand this question can be externally oriented, where you're talking about growth. But other times, as you said, in the way you asked the question, it's about slowing down. It's about breathing. It's about sleeping in. It's about, really deciding not to pursue the next step that you thought was going to lead you to success, because you're starting to reimagine what you think success ultimately might mean.
Okay, I like that, because you reminded me of my dear friend Randy James talking about, and he's like me, possibly like you, and a lot of folks listening who are very production minded. And his concept that he reminds us of often is we need to do the hard work of relaxation, because it's hard to slow down. And you mentioned seasons and cycles. I have grown to appreciate that. And like you, witness so many successful people. They don't always go every single day. And I found that having peace with, you got a book deal or a book coming up, man, you're putting in some longer hours. It's a cycle, a season, but then it's going to end, and let it end and have some rest. I do want to, yes, please.
I have a friend who I work with, one of the coaches in our organization, and he always has this thing like, slow down and don't miss what's in front of you. Don't miss what's in front of you. Don't miss what's in front of you. And so I was talking to him about my little boy, Patrick, about to turn 13. And he's like, Leary, don't miss what's in front of you. Do the next best thing for him. And Patrick loves basketball. He just loves basketball. He believes he's going to be the next NBA point guard. I'm not so convinced, man. He's got the O'Leary genes flowing through his body, but you never know, man. Miracles happen. So last week, rather than racing through work, I took the majority of a day off when he was at school and painted the key and the 3-point arc in our backyard. So it's, in quotes, disfiguring our driveway. It's taking me away from the work I should be doing. It's getting me away from achieving greater success organizationally and financially. And in asking the question and answering it, what more can I do? I realized on that day, it's about slowing down, taking a day for myself, but taking a day to reinvest that time into one of my little ones. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. So it's something I think we all need to hear from time to time from a friend. Sometimes the reflection in the mirror. Don't miss what's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm grateful to have my wife often call me to that. And I've got an older son who is prone to, sit there and eat his breakfast alone and just looking out the window or whatnot. And I would have been the one. No, I have been the one in the past to say, oh my gosh, man, how can you just sit there, do something? You could be reading right now. You could be whatever. And I don't know if it came from us, if we heard it somewhere, but through dealing with, or, my witnessing of him, we got the concept of don't just do something, sit there. And man, I can't even say it. I can't even get it out well because
Yes.
it's so antithetical to my wiring, but I'm learning, John.
Well, man, it's called Sabbath, and we need that weekly. We need to bake in vacation periods throughout our months and our years. But even throughout our days, man, you gotta pause to truly do effective work long term. You gotta have little baby Sabbaths built in throughout your days. Even I think your son's onto something.
So let me ask you about that, just as far as the aspect of habits and routines. How do you habitually Sabbath, and what's that look like?
So I'm gonna come. I'll back into this by first letting you know I've not heard my phone ring in a couple years. I don't want to be like in decades. That's a little excessive. But for a couple of years, I've had my phone on vibrate, and usually not even on my body. And because I found myself, as most high achievers and most ADHD ladies and gentlemen leaders in the marketplace, responding immediately to every pull on my time. And one of the most effective things that I've done for my family, for my leadership, for my business, and my mental health is to no longer be at the beck and call of my phone. And so one way I have achieved Sabbath is when I'm at home, I'm at home. When I work, man, I work like a dog. I'm here right now. But when I'm at home, I'm not on social media. I'm not on email. I'm not trying to strategize for the next day until my kids are in bed. I want to be fully engaged in their lives. And so it's one thing we've done strategically to live out that idea of Sabbath. So what does that look like tactically? Well, if you're not working when you're home, it actually means you're present with your little ones. In my case, I have 4 kids. And so when my little daughter says, hey, Dad, you want to have tea time? Yeah. When Patrick says, hey, Daddy, you want to shoot baskets? Absolutely, man. When Henry says, do you want to go on a bike ride? Dude, yes. Dad, you want to kick the soccer ball? Says Jack. Come on, man, I'm in. It makes you liberated to be free to be with the ones that matter most. And so I just encourage folks, man, really do diligently work hard, really plan your day and then work that day. And when you're home, step away from technology. You will be far healthier and happier because of it.
Yeah. Yes. Speak of shooting baskets. I do want people to realize that you're shooting baskets and you do not have any fingers. Like, you get extra credit, obviously.
Not only that, I will challenge any of your listeners right now. When I'm in your community someday, I shoot underhand, balancing the ball on my knuckles. I will challenge you to a game of horse, and we'll I don't know what we'll play for. We'll put some small bet on the side to see who's going to knock this one down. But
okay, I'll take it. Bottle of wine, you're on.
Bottle of wine, and red wine preferably. But my mom and dad, as great leaders, taught me as a little boy, there's nothing you can't do. There's just nothing you can't do. And so they removed that ceiling from my life. They also reminded me, and it will not be easy to get there. I'm not going to lay it out for you, John. There's nothing you can't do, but you got to go, man. You got to go. And so I do a lot of things today that are pretty radical, like shooting the basket underhand on my knuckles and doing it pretty effectively. But I think I do that not only because they've removed my excuses, but because they gave me a gentle kick in the rear end saying, you can do this.
Yeah. I thought of it a little bit ago, and it's something that I wanted to cover in the first show together. And I think I just let it slip. And it's a rabbit trail again, but I'm going to take it, and it's relevant as we're talking about your hands and fingers or lack thereof. Something that I read in your book, and I think I had read it in the first, I don't know if you had it in the first one, you can tell me, but that just stuck with me. And it was I think a hot point for me because I love the story that Zig Ziglar talks about, a guy whose name I can't recall. I've talked about him in a show. It was a guy who was pronounced a dunce in school and told he was, delayed and whatever. And so he lived his life that way. And I'm drastically paraphrasing. And at the age of whatever, 25 or something, happens to take this test, and they come back and go, oh my gosh, you're not only smart, you're literally a genius. It's, high IQ of 140, 50, I don't know what it was. The guy went on to, and the guy from that day forward started living as a smart guy. Nothing changed. He's the same dude. He was just going by what he had been told. And I think the story is he founded the Mensa Society. If not, it's a good story. But it's something that
I'm going to share it tonight at the dinner table.
I can give you the details. I put it in a show, and if you look up, Zig Ziglar dunce or something like that, you'll probably find it. You'll find the details. Okay, but with that, in this, I think it was your recent book, In Awe, read about the doctor that you went to as a 9-year-old, after the accident, who said, if he were a horse, I would shoot him. I mean, it almost chokes me up just to say that. I mean, it's just I cannot imagine. But
Yes.
that was given to you. If he was a horse, I would shoot him. That was given to you in front of your face, in front of your parents, by a doctor. So by somebody that we would give authority, credibility, value, yada yada. And then I don't know how much later you can tell me you went to another doctor. Well, and tell us what he said.
Yeah, I mean, just to back it up a moment ago, because some of your listeners may not know, but I got burned when I was 9 and spent months in the hospital.
Yeah.
Really should not be alive. I think through the miracle of work and grace and a whole lot of people showing up, this little guy goes on to survive, spends about a year recovering, and then mom and dad take me to a doctor. And to your first point, the doctor took a look at my hands. He took a look at my body. He took a look at the little wheelchair that I was seated in back then. And then he looked at my dad and said, listen, if your son was a horse, I would shoot him. And so that was crushing. That was, in my own world, far worse than even being called a dense.
Oh, it's diabolical.
And he said it not only smugly, but sincerely. Just like there's no really meaningful life here. So about a week later, we go to another physician's office. His name was Dr. Carlos Papalardo. And what I remember, Kev, about this guy most is he walked into the room, he had a file in front of him, and he was singing in Italian. So like I barely have a grasp, as your listeners now know, of English. He's singing in Italian, sits down, shuts the file. He claps his hands loud at the desk and says, my goodness, what luck is this? Has it come to pass that today is the day I get to meet the miracle boy himself, John O'Leary? Has it come to pass? And with that, he claps his hands again. He grabs the file. He opens it back up, covers his face, walks out of that room. And my mom and dad are like, we're looking at each other like, what was this? Then he opens up the door, looks directly at me, not at my mom and dad, looks directly at me and says, oh my, were you here the entire time? And I'm 10 years old at that time. So the hook is completely now in my mouth, and I'm taking the bait all the way to the finish line. And he goes, I am so embarrassed. My name is Carlos Papalardo. And then he says, may I shake your hand? The other guy never even introduced himself to me. He shakes my hand firmly, says it's an honor. At the end of this hour consult, my dad says, Doc, what do you think? And so you remember the last diagnosis. If he was a horse, I'd shoot him. So we're waiting. We don't know what the diagnosis is. And my doctor friend, Carlos Papalardo, looks at my dad, then looks at me, looks at my hands, looks up at me and says, Denny, that's my dad's name, your son, his hands are as beautiful as an Italian sunset. You can imagine which physician we chose to work with. We had 4 operations with Dr. Carlos Papalardo. He was able to cut into the webbing of my hands, provide little fingers where there were none originally. I have the ability today, Kevin, not only to shoot baskets on my knuckles, but to write and type and hold a mug and type, on the computer and everything else through this guy's incredible work. But far more than his work, it's that ability to see beauty where others see death. And now if we pull this thing through into society today, I'm not trying to make a societal point, but I will. We have politicians on both sides of the aisle. We have a media pervasively. We have neighbors on every side of the street who are telling us that our world is ugly, that there's no reason for hope, that it's never been worse than these days. There's a whole lot of people saying that there's a horse that ought to be shot. Yeah. We need, and not like we want, no. We need leaders to step in and say, my gosh, it is not perfect and it will not be this side of eternity, but the foundation is firm. The best is in front of us. It's time to roll up our sleeves together, lock arms, and do this thing, man. It's as beautiful as an Italian sunset. It's a perspective issue.
I love it. And I'm happy to talk about the culture because I have witnessed so many people, and we all know that, but I think we're not grasping the choice of it. We think that, okay, this came along and it wrecked all these people out of jobs, out of work, lower income, yada, yada. these people, it helped. Hey, if you sell masks, you're raking in, and it's just circumstantial. I mean, I've seen so many people with so many businesses to realize that the majority of it is just what they did with it. Those who took it and said, oh my gosh, we are wrecked, they're wrecked. And the other ones who said, well, what are we going to figure out? How can we paint a sunset with this one? And they've gone, as you and I talked about, I don't know if it was online or offline, but talked about, they pivoted. And they're doing, some of them are doing far better than they were to begin with. Some are doing, well, you talked about it in the show. You're about 60% of where your business is, but that's better than 10% or no percent. And it was that. But coming back to the analogy, or not the analogy, the reality that you did. I mean, we know how you were 10 years old, how dramatic it is today. Today, I'm 49 and I can still be impacted by, if somebody came along and said, man, I've been listening to your shows. Look at all you do. I think it's complete crap. I think you're full of yourself. I think you're both, I can't not have that impact me a little bit, and vice versa. If I get a call and they say, oh my gosh, man, Oprah's a peon next to you, man. You got the stuff. It matters. I mean, it just does. And so for you to be given that in a span of a week, did you say?
Yeah, a week.
You could have gone either way. I mean, you could have gone either way, because people are going to hear that and go, okay, well, you were saved by the latter doctor. I mean, you could have reversed the roles, I guess, and had that. But either way, you got to choose which one you went with. And I don't know if you look back then and say you did make a choice, or that latter doctor did help you. I don't know. How did you grapple with that?
So I think it's a microcosm, a beautiful story that illustrates a life journey for all of us.
Sure.
It's a pretty powerful thing. When you hear about it, one doc saying, I'd shoot the horse, and the other one saying it's as beautiful as the Italian sunsets I used to watch growing up in Italy. But it's a beautiful story that illustrates what is possible in each of our lives. It's a true story in my case, but I think it proves truth in all of our lives.
Yeah.
And Kevin, I think what you're hinting at is, John, at age 10, that would have been hard to hear. Kev, I think it's harder to hear in your 40s. I think we were far more resilient, faithful, tough. We bounced forward as kids. I think now that we're stuck in our ways in our mid 40s, these things can be the end of the day. So someone were to say to you, your podcast is lousy, you're full of yourself, Kevin, get off the high horse and come on back down to reality. Man, that could be a death blow. That's the kind of thing that really can jar us away from moving forward in our business, our lives, our families. And so then the question we ought to be asking is, so how do we return to that resiliency, that faithfulness, that hopefulness, that joyfulness that we once had as children? That even a doctor who said, I'd put a bullet in you, even that didn't ruin my day. I remember kind of laughing about it. I wasn't happy about it, but I remember thinking, what a jerk. But it didn't bother me. And I remember, because it was a 7-hour drive from my house where that doctor lived, my mom and dad cried the majority of the way home. I never understood that. Not until I became a dad myself. I never understood, why would they let some stupid doctor ruin their day? Man, I'm 10. I wonder if the baseball game's on tonight. I hope it is. That's my mentality. It's called living in the moment. We let some commenter on our podcast ruin our lives. That's our adult mindset. And so we got to return to this raw, ferocious optimism that we had as children and can step back into as adults.
Well, which is the focus of your new book, In Awe, folks. And if you didn't hear the first show, which will be the 2 before this one, and talking about those childlike qualities, I did exactly what I said I'd do after we did the first show together. And I went home and talked to my family about it. And it's been on my mind as I've seen my kids, and to see my little ones who are so proud of all that they do, and to see my older ones. That was where it was great to talk with and say, see, guys, that there's this coming of age, this coming of awareness, and you start to minimize, start to diminish. So now you're aware. Don't let that happen. It was great. It was, again, just so powerful. Okay. I do want to come back to a couple of habits, and I do appreciate you talking about the phone, man. I carry my phone everywhere, mainly because I play music on it. This is my music source. I'm never without music. If I'm in my office, I'm listening on my, through my speakers and stuff. But when I get home, what's that?
Your guy today, who are you listening to?
Today, I was listening to, man, I can tell you, because I did something different. I did this easy bike ride, and I put on, and I listened to a new group called Rise that I just found through a station. And then Josh Garrels, Rise is not totally, I mean, it's kind of fun music, but it's not I wouldn't say it's safe for the whole family. Then I listened to Josh Garrels, who is I do not know the dude, but somebody got me on one of his songs. I started listening, and he's a Christian guy who apparently doesn't want to be associated with being a Christian guy. I heard the story, do not know if it's true, but it's interesting that he was nominated for a Dove Award, which is the Christian musical or Christian, I guess, I think it's music. And he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to be lumped in with that. But the guy just has some good tunes. So that's what I was listening to. Then I have a playlist. My Spotify playlist is kind of the family. My kids, it's one of the high points of being a dad is my kids say that my playlist is the best of any that they have. They dig my music. And so when I get home, it goes into the speaker because I start cooking and we got music and it's my phone. So it's the music player. So I'm not on it at all. But, I don't do phone calls, or I don't take phone calls unless they're scheduled or it's my family and I can see them on my contacts list. Otherwise, I just don't answer them. Everybody knows to text me and then I can respond when it's convenient for me. So yeah, my kids have nobody I know. And I'm saying this with gratitude and pride. I'll admit it, that I'm not the guy that ever looks at his phone unless every once in a while I'll do a lunch with somebody. I'll say, man, I am so sorry, but my wife is down in the Springs. I do have, 6, 7, whatever kids here at various places. And I'm kind of on call. So I am going to leave it there. And if you see me peer over it, it's just to make sure nobody broke a bone, because I did it once, John. I did the nice thing at lunch and I put it away as I'm not going to look at it. And it was literally that thing. My wife she works a couple days a week and she was out of commission. And then when I finally picked it back up, it'd been like 35 minutes. They were trying to get me from school. One of my kids broke their arm. So that was my call to arms to at least look at it.
10 years ago on December 7th, I had a client's lunch and phone was off. Looked down about halfway through, had 13 missed calls from my wife. Oh. And her water broke at her office.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Sometimes you got to keep your phone on, people.
Yeah. Just
audience.
For that. Yeah. So habits, again, I do want to hit on, I love the trails we've gone down, but again, just some of those primary habits. You talked about the morning, you talked about that thing, but when we look at like the Ziglar wheel of life, we look at, work and relationships and your physical wellness. Let me hit that. We talked about it a little bit in the first show. I think you're a fan of walks. Is that right? Yeah. Did we talk about that? What are some of if you looked at the habits and routines that you value for your health and wellness, give me the highlights.
And let me be wildly transparent that on that wheel that Ziglar introduced me to, my weakest area is health. And as a guy, I can make all kinds of excuses. I can talk about scars and physical pain and like I'm 43, but the journey to where I am today has aged me a little bit, man. So I've been through some physical challenges, both looking backward, but also even in the present. So I'm in a little bit of pain every single day. I wish, which is a lame word sometimes, I wish I was a little bit more intentional in my physical health. I'll share with you my practice here, but I'm going to tell you again, I wish I was even more intentional on this. The things that I do that are beneficial. Number one is I watch what I put into my body. So I used to be an addict, probably to alcohol, although I did not know it when I was, but for more than a decade, man, I overserved myself way, way, way too frequently. And now for the most part, I won't allow myself to have more than one drink a night. So that's one area that I've made some improvements. Soda.
I did hear you mention red wine. Is that your go-to?
I do love not every night, but I will have a glass of red wine, man. I love wine.
I do too.
I think, Kevin, if I'm just being totally honest, man, I used to love it. Want to disappear like into the moment, like just kind of forget about everything, which is not a super great reason to have a glass of wine or 2 or 3 or 4. Now when I have a glass of wine, it's to really celebrate a moment. It's to enjoy a taste of something. It's to celebrate something with my wife or a friend. It's not just because, well, that's what you do when you're out with friends on the weekend. You just drink, and then when you're done with that one, you go to the next one. So that's no longer how I participate in my social life. And that's actually been very healthy for me. We mentioned soda a moment ago. I used to not drink water. I used to just go from soda to soda to soda all day long. And I used to work construction of all things. I don't drink soda anymore. I drink a coffee in the morning and then water throughout the day. I'm more mindful of what I put into my body via food, right? So I don't eat a whole lot of fried food, if at all. When it's an option, I'll try to do totally like a veggie type lunch or dinner. I find that what you put into your body is going to influence your performance throughout the day. And so just stuff like this. And then finally, you mentioned, John, I remember from our first conversation, you do walks. Like, that's right. So my body takes a while to warm up throughout the day, but near the end of the day is when I'm probably at peak performance. So when I get home from the office, Beth and I will either do the dishes together, or before we make dinner, we'll take a walk together a couple times around the block. And it's good on so many levels, spiritually, relationally as a spouse, and then physically, just to stretch, to move, to sweat a little bit. And so that's part of my habits throughout the day.
Yeah. Hey, and I want people to hear that too, because we often have these great attributes, habits, routines set out before us, and we think, oh, I got to do it that way. And, Robin Sharma had him on, and I really appreciate him. He's really big on exercise. I think within like the first 20 minutes. I don't. And I often will wait, especially here in Colorado, I'll wait till it gets warmer. So I'm often 9, 10 o'clock, but I'll go through seasons of waking up and I'll be working out in my home gym, lifting weights at 6 or whatever. And here you are talking about doing it at night. I've got a daughter, and she's kind of a 4 or 5 o'clocker, and she goes up into our workout room and she does her routine. I'm thinking, man, whatever works for you. I mean, you've obviously done well doing it that way. So I want people to hear whatever works. The point is, do some movement every day, but whenever you do it, don't take one person's dictate, because
Right.
people will, that they get excited about what works for them and they want to espouse it to everybody else. I've done it. I admit it. Find what works for you. Yeah, here's mine. I did mine at 10:30. I got here just in time to have some lunch. And so I'm fitness fresh, as one of our nutritionists says, right now, from my exercise habit. Tell me about relationships, John. You've got 4 kids all at home. Well, I asked last time, but I forgot. What's the age range, youngest to oldest?
14, 12, 10, and 8. 14,
Okay.
12, 10, and 8. 4 kids.
So your home is full. Granted, you get a lot of time with them. What are some of the relational habits that you put in place with kids, with wife, whatever, to keep those relationships where you want them?
So I'm going to go back to pre-COVID, because that's where we eventually will return to when the new normal returns,
Yeah.
God willing, in early 2021. But Beth and I take one date night a week. So that's very helpful and healthy for us as a couple to see each other face to face. No distractions, no phones, no kids, no work. So we have a date night at least once a week. We take a couple's trip 4 times a year, which sounds excessive, I would imagine, to many of your listeners. But for a guy who travels a lot, it works right into our wheelhouse, where we can use miles, we can use hotel points. It's free. And we get to go to paradise together for a couple of days to reconnect. I get a little bit of work done, but primarily my work is to fall back in love with my wife. So those are cool things she and I do together. We walk every night together around the block a couple times. We have a family dinner. So this is all the Beth and John stuff. And then the final thing we do together, without getting overly intimate, is we go to bed every single night together at the same time. And there was a time in our marriage where I prided myself on being the hardest worker in the world, man. I would stay up until 2 a.m, get up again at 5, and just, man, I was going to prove myself to the world. That's fine. But I have recognized as I've aged a bit that the most important relationship should not be with the one at my office. It ought to be with the one that I am lucky enough to call my wife. And hopefully she feels lucky enough to call her husband. Yeah. And so I've committed to go into bed next to her every night. That also, because she goes to bed about 10:30, it allows me to get up at about 5 or 5:30 and feel highly refreshed. So that's on the Beth side. With the kids, I take one kid on we call it a daddy trip every year. So they get to look at my calendar and pick where they want to go. They get to book the hotel. They get to book every single activity we do while we're there. And my job is to say yes to them. That's not to spoil them. It's to liberate them to decide the path they want to go on this weekend with their dad. So whether it's a water park or it's just dad, let's rent rooms, let's have room service and watch a movie together, whatever they want to do. I want to say yes. I want them to be the star. So it's a really cool time for a dad to connect with his 4 kids. So I've really enjoyed the dad trips. And then daily, I'm highly intentional that I want to spend some one-to-one time with each kid. I read years ago, Kevin, that the average eye contact a child receives from their parent is less than 8 seconds per day.
Holy smokes.
You might be thinking that's nonsense. I really challenge you as a parent, if you have kids still at home right now, ask yourself if it really is nonsense in your life. When you think about the pace that your life is lived and the sprint that they are under, the sports activity, all the things we do, how often are you belly to belly looking square into their eyes and they, as importantly, looking into yours? So I want to make sure every single day we spend a focused amount of time where I'm looking into their hearts and they're looking right back into mine.
Goodness, with that stat, you'd be a rock star to spend 1 full minute, 60 seconds eye to eye in comparison. I did not know that. That's daunting. That's horrific. I want to ask you because, date night once per week, people hear that. And what I have found is when people hear that and think, okay, I need to start doing that, they often struggle with, what do we do? So I'm going to ask you, what do you guys do? Because, the consummate thing is, well, we go to dinner and a movie, and, what do you guys do on that date night?
Yeah. So we seldom go to movies. Beth loves movies. So occasionally I'll take her for her. I always find that, movies are great. So I'm not trying to knock those who love movies. When I'm with her, I want to talk to her, man. I want to hear her. I want to see her face. I just want to really be present with her. So sometimes we'll do the movie thing. Generally, though, it's going to be a dinner somewhere. It's going to be, man, I consider a date hopping in the same vehicle, driving to a place that is sold out, recognizing, well, that's not going to work, and then driving home. Like, that can be a phenomenal date. Just time together as a couple when you're talking about life. So try not to overthink it. If, however, you're in a place in your relationship where you're struggling, one thing that some of my friends who do a little bit of marriage counseling suggest is that you plan the date for your significant other. Don't tell them what you're doing. Just plan it. Make it as fun as if you were courting them again. When you surprise them with flowers when they got into the automobile, when you surprise them by, they love Italian, but you haven't had Italian in 6 months because you've been busy and there's too many carbs in it. And you don't want to gain, weight over the weekend. Fine. But he or she loves Italian. Surprise them with that reservation from the very first date that you had together at that place. Just be a little bit more romantic. And the amazing thing is that what you focus on grows. So in trying to be a little bit more of something, you'll find yourself connecting more deeply with a person that maybe ultimately we should have been more romantically and intimately involved with in the first place. We sometimes let these things go stagnant, and stagnation over time leads to death.
Your statement, I'm going to send it to my wife after this because she has said it in so many ways, though not as concisely, I guess. Taking time to fall back in love with you said wife, but with my spouse. You say you take a couples trip for a couple. You mean with other couples or just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
Okay. I figured you did, but I wanted to clarify. We do as well. We do usually 1 or 2 big ones, to the Mexico all-inclusive resort or whatever, but then we'll do an Airbnb, or my wife does, you talked about the point. She does the Hyatt thing. So we'll go to the Hyatt 5-star whatever deal and hang out there, and that's it. She'll say that. My kids, let me testify to this. I've got older kids, and some of my listeners have heard this, though I don't know all of them, and I won't go too deep into it, but my kids, there was one point where my wife and it was tension between us at the home, and one of my kids said, "You guys need to go away together. You're better when you do." Yeah. And talk about convicting, but I love that, taking time to fall back in love. I just appreciate your testimony of that, because do I always love my wife? Yes. She has my commitment. She has my devotion. Do I always like my wife? No. And do I have that feeling of in love with her all the time? No. But man, when we do those getaways, especially because we'll go for, 3 days is an absolute minimum, but a lot of times we're at 5 or 7 days on that. And it's a different world than being home, being co-parents and partners and all that. So falling back in love with your wife. Thank you for putting it out there. I will send that to her because we're actually due one. So,
and a couple little bullets just to add to that.
Please.
That don't have the Hyatt 5-star points or the other points that we might sometimes use. Man, send the kids to grandma and grandpa's for the day or the weekend. It can be in your own backyard. It can be in your own bedroom. You don't necessarily need to go to Mexico and drop $6,000. So the point there, Kevin, is there ought to be no excuses. There's a neighbor, there's an uncle, there's an aunt, there's a loved one who can take the kids if you have kids, take the animals if you have animals, and take the excuses that are keeping you from doing life in a really intimate, romantic way, where you can look at this other person and say, man, I still do. I made that commitment 6 years ago, 16 years ago, 36 years ago, and I still mean it. I still do. Because sometimes then that wake that you come out of those weekends with can allow you to get through some of the grind that normal life frequently does indeed produce. That makes it hard to like.
Yeah, thank you for putting it out there, and appreciate you saying that too. That doesn't have to be the 4-star or the 5-star resort or whatever. We have done that with not only getting a couples getaway, but giving each other getaways. And it's kind of be a bit of a habit amongst friends that if somebody's leaving town, their house is empty. Does anybody want to use it? So, individually for a getaway from everything, or for a couples thing, and that costs absolutely nothing. I probably do that once a quarter. I'll end up and I'll just hang out at somebody's house for a couple nights because they're gone, and that's cheap, cheap and easy. Well, I don't know if we can get any more value out of this show, but I will ask, when you look at the Ziglar Wheel of Life, are there any other primary habits and routines that you're very consistent on, that you would say these are top of the list of value, that I don't let these go ever, or very, very seldom do I skip these?
Just on the spiritual aspect, for me, my life is organized, or literally organized around my faith. And I find that what we calendarize, we somehow have time for, whatever that thing is. And so on a financial perspective, we put out there that we're going to give money monthly toward charity. And in a year of recession, when the income is down far more than what we expected, we're still living into that expectation that we laid out in January 1. It's a commitment to us. It's what we consider an expectation from God. He's given us so much. And so the least we can do is give a bit of that back. And so for us, that's really important to plan that. So that's part of what our habits are. We give intentionally. We also go to church intentionally. I have a lot of friends who go when there's time. What I find is I never have time. I'm an extraordinarily busy guy, and I'm graced in that way and that way. So I would never, ever, ever go. Why would I? I got a lot of things to do. So rather than making it around time, I make it around the calendar. So it is the first commitment we have, to make it to church every week. When the churches have been shut down due to COVID-19, as a family, we gather around a 36-inch television screen. We try to get the kids to sit still for 45 minutes to an hour, and we go to church at home. So we're still doing this thing, even though, in quotes, we don't have time, or even though, in quotes, well, COVID shut it down. So for us, growing spiritually is critically important. And that's a weekly thing. It's an annual thing. It's a financial thing. It's a before dinner thing. It's a morning prayer ritual. It's before you go to bed thing. It's a mission statement for life. My mission statement, Kevin, the reason that I work as hard as I do, the reason I choose to be on your podcast, God demands it. My family deserves it. The world is starved for it. Let's roll, no excuses. That's my mission statement. But it begins with God. And so the habit that kind of organizes everything else that I do is based on my belief in God, and I believe his belief in me.
That I believe in his belief. I have come to, it was actually, again, my dear friend and business partner, Randy, who at one point said, you know what, I'm going to believe the Jesus in you. I'm going to trust the Jesus in you. That's a phrase that we've said over. It's such a jolt of good expectation within each other to do that. And what you said there reminded me of it. All right. I got one more spot though I do want to ask about. And this is one that I have grown. I'm a little more enamored with it every day. And there's some reasons behind that, but it's just of interest to me as I view people out there who are achieving good things. Things that I value is the personal spoke, the things that you do just for John. And I've often tried to couch those in the things you do that are fun or play, even though I admittedly sometimes struggle with ever doing things that to me are fun or play. I don't even resonate with that. I'm going to produce something, but hobbies is another, fun play, hobby, something that you invest in, or just self-care, however that speaks to you, but the things that you do to make John be the fullest John he can be.
Man, so I think we've been hinting at it the entire time. So I'm going to echo a little bit of what we've said. In some regards, I feel as if watching that sunrise is only for me. I may do more at work because of that. I may live longer years. There's a lot of research around gratitude leading directly to longevity, believe it or not. So although it might help me live longer, I cannot tell you how filled I get when I watch a sunrise and when light for the very first time hits my face in the morning. Like, it's, to me, like, I have goosebumps right now as you and I are talking. Blows me away, man. Being with my kids, yeah, it's for them, I guess. But man, I feel pretty selfish when I'm out there shooting baskets. I feel pretty selfish when I hear him say, "Change, Dad," or "Splash" when he makes a 3-pointer and I get to kick him back the ball and he gets to shoot again. I feel like that's for me. When I'm braiding a little girl's hair, when she's saying to me, "Watch me do the somersault." Yes, I'm doing it all for her, I guess. But man, I feel awful selfish when I'm in that moment. Even when I'm going to bed at the end of the day next to my wife, who I'm still pretty wild about, even today, 16 and a half years in, to roll over, kiss her goodnight, and look at this girl that I think is prettier now than she was when I said I do 16 and a half years ago. I guess I'm saying goodnight to her for her, but it's, again, it's a selfish motive in some regard. So my personal spoke is filled by being present to those around me.
Yeah. I appreciate that about your wife. I always feel like I kind of always desired a cougar. Well, now that my wife's 50, I got one, you know, it gets better all the time. I'm achieving that goal, and I got to stay with the same woman. It's just the best of all worlds.
That's awesome.
So I appreciate your testimony, man. Thank you for the behind the scenes, for sharing. I love the rabbit trails we got on. Those might be right there worth the price of admission, but just, man, just a gift to share with you. I could have these conversations constantly with you. Maybe we should have a Zoom coffee every week or something, man. Just thank you, John. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for putting your heart out there and letting us all benefit.
And to all my friends who feels that, man, I'll never do whatever these guys are doing on these podcasts week after week, I just think it's about progression. Yeah. So when you drink again, when you overeat again, when you sleep in again, when you say something you regret again, all this stuff that we do as human beings all the time, I think you got to offer yourself a little bit of grace to learn the lesson, lick the wound, and then do a little bit better thereafter. So don't let your mistakes be the end of the journey. Let them be utilized to not only shower grace into your own life, but to offer to a community that is desperate for it. So it can actually be the birth of empathy in your own life to connect to those around you.
Perfect anchor for the show, brother. Thank you, John. Just a pleasure.
Thank you, Kevin.